There was a sentence a girl in this village had to say out loud alone at the mouth of a cave on the day she turned 15. Guard this village with my life, until the day the next one is delivered. Not until I am forgotten. Not until you are satisfied. Until the next one is delivered. My grandmother was supposed to say those words in the summer of 1949. She didn't. From forgotten folklore to hidden histories, some records demand to be found. Tonight, 3 mysterious stories from Japan. All 3 were told as things that happened to a grandmother, to a carload of teenagers, to a man whose job was making maps. None of them can be checked. That is part of what makes them survive. And in all 3, an explanation goes missing somewhere. What's left behind is a rule. My grandmother was born in 1934 in a village in the mountains of the north. She died at 91, and she told this story exactly once. The village had no road, no school, and no dealings with anywhere else. A few times a year, the adults would leave together, walk out for a day, and come back with food and salt and cloth and tools. That was the village's only contact with the world, and it was the only thing the children looked forward to. They always went in a group, even when it was only salt. She told me she never once, in her whole childhood, saw a grown adult walk out of that village on their own. 11 children were born in that village the year my grandmother was born. She could still name all 11 at the very end of her life. She did it once, in order, counting them off on her fingers. By the time she turned 15, there were 3 of them left, herself and 2 boys. Nothing supernatural took the others. There was no doctor and no road out, so it was fever and bad winters and a fall from somewhere and the ordinary things that used to take children everywhere. 2 of them she could not picture at all. They had died before she was old enough to hold on to a face. The 3 who were left were raised so closely together that she said the boys were brothers to her. And the rest of the village came in 2 more layers. The parents, all roughly the same age as each other. Above them, the grandparents, the same. 3 flat bands of people, and nothing in between them. No toddlers, no teenagers besides the 3 of them. Nobody in their 20s at all. She said it as though it were normal, because to her it had been. There was no school, so the teaching was done by parents, and it came down to 3 things. Have as little to do with the outside as possible. Obey anyone older than you without exception. And honor the one who keeps the village. That last one had a name. She was certain of that. But she either never learned it or was never allowed to repeat it, and she never once said it in front of my family. So she used the title, the one who keeps the village. She was not told what it kept the village from. She was not told what it was. Children in that village were taught the honor and not the reason. And by 15 you had learned not to ask. On the morning of her 15th birthday, her parents sat her down formally, the way you would sit down a stranger, and they explained how the village worked. Every so often, the village gives a 15-year-old girl to the one who keeps it. This has been done since long before anyone could remember. Once she has been given, the young people of her generation leave the village. They all go on the same morning, and every one of them goes alone. They have until the first snow to find a husband or a wife out there, and to bring that person back into the village. Then every couple who comes back has to produce a child before the second winter. And once every household has done that, nobody in the village is permitted to have children again. Not discouraged, not postponed, forbidden, until the next girl is given. That was why the village came in 3 flat bands. Everyone was born inside the same short window, and then the window shut. And this is the part she wanted me to understand. When one of those 11 children died, nothing happened. Nobody had another baby. Nobody was allowed to. A child who died in that village could not be replaced, because the window it had been born in was already closed behind it. That is how you get from 11 to 3. And of the 3 who were left, my grandmother was the only girl, so there had never been a decision to make. There had only been a date. She asked whether anyone who had been given ever came back. Her parents said no, not one. They didn't know whether that meant the girls were taken, or whether they were alive somewhere and simply never returned. She said the strangest part was that her parents were not upset. They weren't cruel and they weren't cold. They were resigned, the way you are resigned about winter. They told her the offering would be the following day, and that the method would be explained to her then. Then they let her go outside, and she stood in the middle of the village and looked at it. Smoke was coming off every roof. Somebody was splitting wood behind the grandparents' houses. 2 women were talking down by the water. A door opened and shut somewhere she couldn't see. Nothing had changed. Nothing was going to. She told me that was the part she wasn't ready for. Not the cave. Not the walking. The fact that she was going to spend her last day inside a village where everyone already agreed. She looked at every adult she could see and understood that all of them knew. And all of them thought it was correct. She was 15 and she had run out of people. She went straight to the 2 boys and asked them to run away with her. Neither of them was surprised. That was when she understood that they had already been told, days earlier, maybe longer. They had also been told that if they warned her ahead of time, the one who keeps the village would come and take them instead. So they had said nothing and watched her walk around for days, not knowing. They had no idea how the offering worked. Nobody had told them that part either. So there was no plan to make. What the 3 of them agreed, standing outside in the dark, was only this: that when the moment came, they would think of something, and they would try. Then they went home to sleep. 2 men came for her at noon. They were from the same household. That household had one hereditary function in the village, walking the girl to the place. The knowledge was passed down inside the family, and my grandmother said that even a husband or wife married in from outside was taught it properly. They were there so that she could not run. She never got a chance to speak to the boys. The men simply arrived, and the 3 of them set off up the mountain, 1 man ahead of her and 1 behind. So she talked instead, deliberately, to slow them down. She asked them questions the whole way, and she got 2 answers she never forgot. The first was about the family, that they were the guiding house, and this was all they were for. The second came when she asked what the one who keeps the village actually was. And one of the men told her that it was not a god. He said it as a correction. Not a god. But it had protected the village for a very long time. Then, behind her, she heard a sound in the trees. She looked back. The 2 boys were following them. The man walking behind her asked what was wrong. She said nothing was wrong. He went back to watching where he put his feet. The ground up there was bad, and he had done this walk before, and he had never once had to chase anybody. The path opened into a clear patch of ground, and the men stopped. One of them pointed and told her that if she walked straight ahead from here, she would come to a cave. She was to go the rest of the way alone. They would watch from where they stood. Nobody was to walk that last stretch beside her. So she started walking, slowly, trying to work out what to do. And behind her, somebody shouted. She turned around. Both men were on the ground, and the 2 boys were kneeling over them, tying their legs together with rope. She laughed when she told me this. The only time in the whole story she laughed, because the thing she remembered thinking in that exact moment was, why do they have rope? They ran back down, off the path, keeping to the trees. They were not heading anywhere clever. They were heading for the supply road, the route the adults took on their trips out, because it was the only way out of the valley that any of them knew existed. Getting to it meant swinging wide around the village, and swinging wide meant passing within sight of it. So they saw it. Some of the adults were down on the ground, not searching, not shouting, prostrate, foreheads to the earth, facing up the mountain, facing the direction the 3 of them had just come from. And in among them, the 2 boys' parents were running from house to house, looking for their sons. They kept moving, and then, behind them, the village erupted, shouting, doors, people calling to each other. She always assumed the same thing about that moment, and it is almost certainly right. The 2 men had got their legs free, and they had come back down, and they had told everyone that the girl never reached the cave. The day was ending. The sentence had not been said. Then the sound stopped. She was precise about this. And it is the part of her story I have never been able to put down. She did not say that it went quiet. She said the sound stopped. The insects in the grass, the birds, the stream they had crossed that morning, all of it, at once, the way a hand comes down over a mouth. The three of them stopped walking, because you cannot keep walking in a silence like that. And then they stood in it, she said. They stood there long enough for it to start feeling foolish. Long enough that she began to think she had imagined it, and that in a moment one of them would say something, and they would go on. Then something howled. It came from behind them, and above them, and it was loud enough that it stopped being a sound, and became a pressure in her chest. She never once described it as an animal noise. She described it as an announcement, and the instant it finished, the screaming started in the village. Not one voice. All of them. They got down into the undergrowth and lay flat, and nobody discussed it. For a while, there was nothing to hear except the village. Then something started coming down the slope above them, and it was not being careful. Branches went. Something high up shook and kept shaking after the thing had already passed it. She said the sound was wrong for an animal, and it took her years to work out why. It never paused to place its feet. Then a second set of sounds, much lighter and much faster. And a man came down through the trees sprinting, and behind the man there was a wolf. She had no other word for it. From the shoulders up it was a wolf. She could not tell me how big it was. She had nothing to measure it against, and she got frustrated trying. Then she got up, went to the window, and pointed out at the shed at the end of my grandfather's garden. She said that when it stopped over the man, its shoulders stood higher than that roof. Then she sat back down and didn't say anything for a while. It had overtaken him without appearing to change pace. He went down and did not get up, and beside her, one of the boys made a small sound and immediately clamped both hands over his own mouth. The man on the track was his father. The wolf turned and looked toward the place where they were hiding. She was certain, in that moment, that she was about to die. Not afraid. Certain. It moved around out there for a while. She could hear the footsteps circling, and the breathing, which was heavy and excited, and not remotely tired. And then it went back toward the village. They ran, and somewhere in the next hour, half by accident, they came out onto the supply road. She said, none of them reacted to it. Nobody was relieved. They had just watched a man die, and they simply noted that here was the road, and started walking down it. They followed it until the sky went dark and found a house. They knocked and asked for help, and the people inside pulled a face. An open, undisguised look of not this, not us, not tonight. My grandmother always believed those people knew exactly which valley the three of them had come out of and wanted nothing to do with it. They let them in anyway. She was grateful about that for the rest of her life. And a few minutes after the door closed behind them, they heard the howl again. Nothing else happened. Not that night, not afterwards. She met my grandfather, came south to Chiba, and had 4 children and 11 grandchildren. She never once told him any of this. She never told me what became of the 2 boys either, I asked. She just stopped talking. There is one detail I keep coming back to. The escorting wolf. It falls in behind you on a mountain path at night, and it follows you, and it does not attack. Keep your footing, and it sees you all the way home. Fall, and it takes you. Whatever was in that hillside did not want to be fed. The man on the path told my grandmother it was not a god. Maybe not. Wolves were worshipped in these mountains for centuries. Not as monsters, as guardians. A god that kept the deer and the boar out of the fields. A god said to understand human speech and to weigh what kind of person you were and act on the answer. Then they were hunted. The last confirmed wolf in Japan was killed in 1905. My grandmother walked up that mountain in the summer of 1949. 44 years after there were any wolves left in the country. She gave me all of it that afternoon. The 11 names in order, on her fingers. The rope, the shed roof, the sentence she was supposed to say at the mouth of the cave. All of it except one word. She never said the name. Not that afternoon. Not in the 76 years since she walked down out of those mountains. Not at 91. For a long time, I assumed she had just forgotten it. I don't think that anymore. I think it was the one rule from that village she never broke, and she kept it her whole life, for a thing she spent that same life refusing to go anywhere near. She never went north again, and whatever it was that kept that village, it is still unnamed. Where I grew up, there was one rule about Oban. You did not go near the sea, and you did not go into the mountains. Not for those few days. Not for any reason. Oban is when the dead come home. Most of Japan marks it by cleaning the graves and lighting fires to guide the dead in, then lighting more fires to send them back out. In a lot of places, people float lanterns onto the water to see them off. Where I grew up, we did the graves and the family altar, and then we stayed indoors. My parents never pushed it. It was the grandparents' generation who cared, and they cared the way you care about a live wire. I was about 9 when I understood that. A boy 2 years older than me had gone up into the mountains during Oban. I came round a corner, and there were 4 old people around him, screaming into his face and hitting him. Not disciplining him. Hitting him the way you hit something you are frightened of. I never needed telling again. Then I started high school in the city, with kids from everywhere, and I found out that everybody else swims during Oban. It didn't feel like learning a fact. It felt like being let out of something. I had spent every August of my life indoors, for a reason nobody had ever explained, and the reason turned out to be that my grandparents were superstitious. I was angry at 2 old people who had never done anything to me except worry. So when the message came, the middle day of Oban, the beach, camping, I didn't think about it for 1 second. I told my parents it was a barbecue at a friend's house, and I'd be home on the last train, around 11. Then I built the second half. At 11, I'd ring home, say I'd missed the train, and say I was sitting in a family restaurant until morning. My parents have a drink in the evening, so neither of them would drive out to fetch me. The whole thing depended on making that call on time, so I set the alarm on my phone for 11 o'clock. This was a flip phone. In the middle of the 2000s. Setting an alarm was something you did on purpose, with your thumbs through a menu. I set it for one reason, so I wouldn't forget to lie to my parents. There were 5 of us. One friend's older brother was at university and had a car, which is the only reason any of it was possible. The beach was packed. Families, umbrellas, coolers. I remember standing in the water feeling completely vindicated. Look at all these people. Nothing is happening to any of them. And then there were some things. None of them was enough on its own. Everyone could be explained away in 4 seconds, and we explained all of them away. There was seaweed near me that didn't look like seaweed. It looked like a length of long human hair moving with the water, and when I pushed it off with my foot, it came back. Further out, there was a middle-aged man in a running shirt, standing chest-deep, not swimming, facing the shore with no expression at all. At some point, he went under. I watched the spot long enough that it stopped being a casual thing I was doing. He didn't come up. I told myself he'd swum off underwater and surfaced where I wasn't looking. And there was the photograph. We took one in front of the tent, all 5 of us crouching. Afterwards, every one of us had something on our kneecaps, the same shape on all 5. And the shape was a face. We laughed at it. Cheap phone camera, bright sun, sand on our legs. One of us was much paler in that photo than he was in life. Nobody mentioned that one. We came back and cooked, and somebody asked what we were doing tonight. And of course it became a test of courage. The older brother knew a place, a shrine, a few hundred meters up a trail on a mountain about an hour inland. It had a reputation among university students of his sort. Somebody had died up there. A driver off the pass road, found at the shrine, for no reason anyone could explain. I'd never heard of it. I want that on record. I didn't know I was going somewhere forbidden. I only knew I was going into the mountains during Oban, which was already the whole rule twice over. The drive was where it started. His car was an automatic and it stalled. Twice. On the mountain road, we saw a light ahead of us. Small, about the size of a hand torch, coming down toward us. Single road, nowhere to turn off. We never passed anybody. We pulled onto the shoulder to look at a map, and every streetlight on that side of the road went out at once. And here's what I still can't explain to people. We weren't frightened. We got excited. All 5 of us, more excited with each one of those things. And it wasn't the excitement of a good night out, and it wasn't people being loud because they were scared. Every hair on my body was standing up, and I was thrilled. I remember thinking quite clearly that if one thing tipped it, the 5 of us would beat each other to death in that car, laughing. There was a dam beside the car park, and to reach the trail you had to walk halfway round it. I've thought about this a great deal since. It was 10 at night. There was nothing past the trailhead but mountain, and there was no reason on earth not to drive to the trailhead. Not one of us mentioned it. We walked round the dam in the dark, in single file, behind a 19-year-old, for no stated reason. And everybody was grinning, not smiling, grinning, with teeth, in the dark, at nothing. Nobody made a joke. Nobody said anything at all. Nothing funny was happening and nothing good was happening. And I was so happy. I was happier walking round that dam than at any point that summer. There was nothing to be happy about. On the mountain path, it started coming out of us. Small sounds. The noise you make when you're trying hard not to laugh in a quiet room, and some of it escapes through your nose. Somebody ahead of me, then somebody behind me, then me. By the shrine, we were laughing out loud, all 5, and it wasn't a normal laugh. It went inward, a scraping, sucking laugh, the sort you make when you can't get a breath in edgeways. I was ecstatic, and I was crying. Both were happening in the same body, and neither felt like it contradicted the other. I was having trouble breathing, and it hurt, and I didn't mind. We went through the torii, and all 5 of us immediately walked off in 5 different directions. Nobody said anything. Nobody agreed to split up. We each went somewhere else, like water finding low ground. I found a small stone pond at the edge of the grounds, half choked, more a channel than a pond. I crouched at the lip of it and watched my own tears fall into the water. It was the best thing that had ever happened to me, watching them land, each one. Then, from the middle of the grounds, the older brother started calling us. Delighted? Really delighted. Oi, oi, come here. And the instant I heard his voice, it turned off. Not fear coming back, the happiness leaving. In one step it went heavy, and tedious, and pointless, and hateful, and I thought with enormous reluctance, I suppose I have to go over there. Every step toward them I got sadder. By the time I reached them, I think I was sobbing. They were all crying. 4 of them, in a loose group, weeping, and the older brother was lit up by somebody's torch with the widest smile I have ever seen on a human face. He was holding a rope, old, rotted through, splintering, the fibers standing off it like hair. Nobody knows where he got it. Then my phone went off. Full volume in a mountain shrine at 11 at night. A stupid flip phone alarm. Bright and synthetic and much too cheerful. I jumped so hard I went down on my backside. And riding in behind the noise came a completely ordinary thought. It's 11. I have to ring my parents. That was all of it. A boy remembering a chore. The friend next to me had gone down too. Our eyes met, and he said something like, "Was that yours?" God, that scared me. And he was awake. I could see he was awake. The 2 of us got hold of the other 2 and shook them until they came back. The older brother wouldn't come back. He held onto that rope and made a low noise in his throat and wouldn't look at us. So he took the rope out of his hands and pulled him. And he came much more easily than we expected. I remember the trance better than I remember the walk down to the car. My mind was clear on the way down, and it's the part of the night I've lost, and I never made the call. The alarm went off, and I remembered the one thing it was for, and then I did not do it. By the time I thought of it again, we were already in the car with the doors shut. In the car he came back. Violent hiccups, and roughly, "I don't get it. What was that?" Nobody could drive but him, so we sang. Every loud, stupid song any of us knew, at the top of our voices, for half an hour, until we found a family restaurant just before midnight. And it was still full of people. And I have never been so pleased to see strangers eating. And then my mother rang me. She had waited past 11 for a call that never came. And then she had rung my friend's house, so the beach was already out. My grandmother, she said, was beyond furious. I didn't tell her about the mountain. Not only because I'd be in trouble, I had a clear picture of what telling my grandmother would do to her, and I didn't think she'd survive it. So I lied again, and got until noon. Then all 5 of us frightened. We started talking about it, and the older brother said it had been an act, all of it. He'd been conscious the whole time. Were we surprised? There are no ghosts. Disappointed? Then let's go back. We told him no. He kept going. Come on, won't mess about this time. We'll just go back up. Let's go back. Come on. His words were stretching at the ends. That's what I noticed. The last sound of each sentence going on slightly too long. His younger brother was next to me, half in tears. He nudged me and held out his arm without saying anything. There were gouges down it, fingernail marks, deep bleeding, far more than something you'd fail to notice on yourself. Then he pointed at his own shin black, underneath the skin. His brother had done that to him on the way down, and none of us had seen it happen. Nobody thought it was an act after that. We slept in the restaurant. Staff woke us at dawn. The brother slept too, and he woke up himself again. He barely remembered any of it. What he remembered was being happy, unbearably happy. After he found the rope, it went vague, and he had no memory of calling us over at all. What stayed with him wasn't an image. It was a sense of accomplishment, like he had finished something. We drove back and packed the campsite down without talking. My parents were already waiting nearby when we finished. Both from the same hamlet, both raised on the same rule, and my grandmother's panic had convinced them something was actually wrong. At home, my grandparents were waiting. I wasn't hit. It was close. Lying is the lowest thing a person can do. We have told you every year, for years, and you went to the sea. You betrayed us. I was to chant sutras all day. So I knelt down and started. And after a while, my mother and father came into the room, knelt down, and started chanting too. I assumed they were doing it for me. It was a kind thing to do, and after an hour I told them they could stop. I said I was fine. I'd do it on my own. And my mother said, "Your father and I drove down to the campsite by the sea to collect you. So apparently we have to do this all day as well." I went cold. They had been in a car park where you could hardly see the water, in daylight for a few minutes, to pick up their own son. And it counted. That was when I understood. The rule wasn't about swimming, and it wasn't about behaving well. It was about how close you had been. It applied to my mother, who had done nothing but come and get me. I got up, went into the living room, and told my grandmother everything. The sea, the mountain, the shrine, the laughing, the rope. Her eyes went wide, and her face was terrible, and all she said was, "Keep chanting today." My grandfather looked at me for a long moment and said, "You came back safe, so that's fine." My grandparents knelt down on either side of me, and the 3 of us chanted past midnight. Past midnight, over a late dinner nobody wanted, I finally asked him why. He said he didn't really know. It had always been forbidden. He'd asked the reason himself once, a long time ago, and hadn't kept it. But this is what he had kept. He said what our hamlet practices isn't ordinary Buddhism. He said it might not be Buddhism at all, that our Oban doesn't mean what Oban means everywhere else, not the shrine meaning, not the temple meaning, that it is its own thing and always has been, and that it is separate from the gods of the mountain and the gods of the sea, and that it is not on good terms with them. Then he said that if I wanted the details, I could ask the temple. I asked whether the shrine happened because I broke the rule. He said he didn't know that either. He said again, "You came back safe, so that's fine." My grandmother nodded along with every word. There is a perfectly reasonable explanation for the sea part of this. Around the middle of August, the swell changes. Storms a long way out push heavy waves in, the tides shift, the undertow strengthens, cold water starts moving in underneath, and the jellyfish arrive. People do drown more often in Japan at Obon. Not because the dead are in the water, because the water in the third week of August is not the water from the second. A rule that keeps every child in a village out of the sea in late August is correct. It doesn't matter what story it tells about itself. I find that comforting, and it covers everything except the shrine. It doesn't explain 5 people walking through a gate and immediately going 5 separate ways. It doesn't explain a 19-year-old with his hands closed round a rope nobody can account for. It doesn't explain me crouched at a stone pond at 11 at night, in tears, having the best moment of my life. What I actually think about is the thing my father said at that table. He said, "If your phone alarm hadn't gone off, wouldn't the 5 of you have been in trouble?" I've never settled what that means, but I stopped arguing about Obon. And every August since, my whole adult life, I stay away from the sea and I stay off the mountains. And I could not tell you a single thing about why, which I suppose is exactly how my grandfather got it. The last one is different. Just a young man with a compass and a notebook, whose entire job was knowing exactly where he was standing. I wrote my undergraduate thesis in geology at a university on Shikoku. Fieldwork meant going into the mountains alone, not hiking trails, actual mountainside, well off any road. The method was always the same. Walk the track up to the headwaters of a river, then work back down along the bank looking for outcrops. An outcrop is any place where the rock face is exposed, and you can read the strata directly. You find one, you record it in your field notebook, and at the end you combine your notes with the map and produce a geological map of the area. The part that matters here is the navigation. I worked on compass bearings and a pace count, building my own route map as I went, and correcting against GPS every so often. People will tell you the National Survey maps have errors in them, and they do. I've heard of people getting into real trouble that way. But I wasn't relying on a map. I was drawing one. I was 22, and my entire job that summer was knowing exactly where I was. I went in at 8 in the morning and walked for about 2 hours, mostly on animal tracks. And then the ground opened out into a basin, and there was a hamlet in it. Several dozen houses. It was not on my map. My first reaction was not fear. It was irritation. If there was a hamlet down there, then there was a road in, which meant I could have driven, and I had just spent 2 hours walking for nothing. My second thought was that a gravel road is still a road, and walking on one beats pushing through undergrowth. So I went down into it. The bad feeling started at the edge. Everything was a little worn, but it was not abandoned. That was the thing. The paddies had rice standing in them. The houses were properly shut up, not boarded, not broken. Shut the way you shut a house you are coming back to. There was just nobody. I had walked through hamlets like that before, and at 8 or 9 in the morning in an empty lane is completely normal. But there were no dogs. Not tied up, not barking somewhere, not anywhere. And there were no chickens, and nothing was moving on any of it. Then an old woman came up the lane toward me, pushing a handcart. I said good morning, 'cause that is what you do. She looked at me, the way you look at something that should not be able to be there. Then she turned round, without a word, and went back inside, and that was the end of that. I kept walking, up the middle of the hamlet, toward the mountainside, and I noticed an electricity meter on the wall of the house beside me. I looked at it, for no reason at all. The casing was there. The glass, the housing, the box. The mechanism inside it was gone. I crossed the lane and looked at the one opposite. Same. Casing. No mechanism. The next house along. Same. Somebody had removed the working part of every meter in that hamlet and left the shell screwed to the wall. From the lane, at a glance, that hamlet looked connected to the outside world. Up close, it had never been connected to anything. I went up the gravel road quickly after that. At the top, where it bent round to the left, there was a building like a community hall, and from inside it I could hear people, not words, a sort of bustle, a lot of people moving about in one room. I stopped because I had no idea what I was walking into, and then I looked at the side of the hall. There was a mound of heaped earth beside it, freshly turned and fairly large. Standing in the earth, packed in close, were paper figures. White paper, cut into the shape of a person, each one mounted on a thin stick about the size of a chopstick and pushed into the soil. There were hundreds of them. I remember thinking very clearly and very politely, "No, thank you, not this." And I turned round and went back down the road as fast as I could go. The gravel road ran the length of the hamlet, down from the hall to a T-junction at the bottom. Left and right, and below the junction nothing but paddy. I had come in over the mountain on no road at all, so I took the arm heading south, because south was the only direction a public road could be in. It ran along the bottom of the basin. Then it turned. Then it climbed, and it brought me back up against the other side of the community hall. It was a loop. That was the whole road system. You could walk every meter of surface ground in that hamlet and arrive back where you started, and at no point would you pass anything leading out of the basin. I had a pace count. I had bearings. I was not lost. The hamlet simply did not have the road I was looking for. And while I stood there working that out, the hall started emptying. I actually felt relieved. I decided I would stop being ridiculous and just ask somebody for directions like an adult. What came out of the hall was children. 20, 30 of them, primary school age, pouring out of the doorway. It was a weekday morning. Then several men came out behind them. One of them saw me and shouted, "What are you doing?" And all of them started running at me. So I ran. I went straight off the road and out through the paddies, pushing through the rice, up toward the tree line, as fast as I have ever moved. I could hear shouting behind me the whole way. But when I looked, nobody was chasing me. They had stopped at the edge and they were shouting, and they were not following. I have never worked out whether that was mercy or a boundary. I climbed until I was high enough to look down on the whole basin, and I stopped to get my breath, and I looked at it properly. There was no road out. Not a bad road. Not an overgrown road. There was no road leaving that basin in any direction. From up there you could see the whole loop of it, lying in the bottom of the bowl, closed, which meant nobody had driven in, which meant every house, every roof tile, every meter casing had been carried in on somebody's back. And from up there I could see behind the community hall, which you could not do from the lane. Standing in rows in the ground back there were crosses. I don't know what else to call them. 2 pieces of wood, fixed at right angles, repeated, in numbers, in ordered lines. I went round the rim of the basin, got back to the car, and drove to the local government office. I asked for their most recent map. Then I told them what I'd seen. They did not believe me. Not hostile. Just, no, there is nothing up there. So I did what you do. I decided it must have been a field study camp, or a retreat, some kind of group facility, and that the shouting men were staff, and that I had frightened somebody by wandering in. That explanation is thin, and I knew it was thin. And I used it for 2 years, and it worked perfectly well. Then a student a couple of years below me said he was doing his thesis in the same field area and asked if I'd give him some advice. I had nothing to give him that wasn't in my thesis, but I asked him, as casually as I could manage, whether he'd come across anywhere odd out there. He said yes. One place. A wide basin, he said, and the whole floor of it was bare ground, cleared and turned over like it had been dug recently, and scattered all across it were toilet pans, the old squat kind. A great number of them, just dumped, lying about on the open dirt. I got out my field notebook from 2 years earlier and checked the bearings against his. And it was the same basin. He was still talking. He said the strange part was that you could see it from up on the ridge, and that it made no sense, because there was no way to get a vehicle in there. So how would anyone dump anything? I didn't have an answer for him. I had a different question. There were no houses, no paddies, no hall, no mound, no crosses. Bare turned earth. in a basin with no road to it. And there is one more piece, and it isn't mine. Years later, someone else told a version of this on the internet. A different person, a different university, describing something they'd heard about a senior of theirs. The senior went into the mountains on a survey and came across a clearing with a mass of toilet pans dumped in it. He went back to survey it again properly, and he didn't come back. He was never found. The detail that gets me is not the disappearance. It's what happened afterward. They said that from then on, at that department, fieldwork had to be done in pairs. Minimum 2 people. New rule. Somebody wrote that down. Somebody put it in a handbook. That is what an institution does when it cannot explain something. It doesn't investigate. It adds a line to the safety procedure and moves on. I have 3 explanations, and I'll give you all of them. The first is the paper figures. Years after I posted this, a stranger read one sentence of it and told me where I had been. Not the region, the specific valley. He worked it out from the figures. White paper cut into human shapes, mounted on chopstick-thin sticks, stood upright in the ground. That is a real practice, belonging to a folk tradition that survives in one deep mountain area of Shikoku, used for purification and for lifting curses and for work I'm not qualified to describe. It is a living thing that living people hold. I am not going to name the place, because a stranger walking through your valley and finding it sinister is not evidence of anything except that he was a stranger, which is not the same as wanting to know what several hundred of them were doing in a mound of fresh earth beside a building full of children. The second explanation is older, and it fits better than I would like. Japan has legends of hidden settlements, people who went into the mountains not to be found, and stayed. The folklore is unusually specific about how that is done. You keep no dogs. You keep no roosters. You keep nothing whose noise carries. You leave no sign at a distance that anyone lives there, and you make the way in as bad as it can possibly be. No dogs, no chickens, no road, and meters with the working parts taken out, so the place reads as ordinary from 10 feet away and has never been connected to anything from 1 foot away. That is not a village behaving strangely. That is a village passing a checklist. The third explanation is the most mundane, and I think it might be true. The hamlet cleared out because of me. A stranger came down the lane on a weekday morning, was seen, was shouted at, and got away. And within 2 years, the settlement had been taken apart. The ground turned over, and they had gone further in, which would mean the junior never found a dump. He found the fixtures. You can carry out timber and tools and bedding and shutters and rice. What you leave is the one thing in a house too heavy to be worth the walk. A ceramic pan set into the floor, one per home, bare turned earth, and across it at intervals, one hard white object for every house that used to stand there. Nobody dumped anything. That basin was the floor plan of a village, laid out where the village had been. I still don't know which explanation is right, but somewhere there is a young man who walked back into a basin like mine to do his job, and never came out of it. History only leaves us the fragments. The rest lives in the shadows. Thank you for exploring these dark corners with me tonight. If you enjoy where folklore meets history, hit that like button and subscribe to join the circle for our next tale.